All right, thank you everyone for joining us tonight to the second part of Parenting to Prevent Substance Use. Last week, we provided an overview of current drug use trends, also how parents can talk to their children about drug use, and also what parents can look for as far as signs that your child might be experimenting, or if it's just regular kind of developmental in adolescence. So tonight we want to further our discussion and really just look at what are some of the prevention and proactive things that the school district here is doing, just to really try to raise awareness and just look at what really happens when a student is violating the drug or alcohol policy as well. And our law enforcement officer, our SRO from Waukesha West High School, will talk a little bit about his procedures and how he intervenes with students as well. And then we have a special guest from Waukesha County Department of Health and Human Services, Carla Rodriguez, who is a social worker with their Adolescent and Family Unit. And we will be also answering our questions that were posed by parents last week. And we'll be able to take a few questions at the end as well. All right, so I would like to have our speakers for tonight introduce themselves and just share what their role is in their relationship to the district.
Hello, my name is Luke Pinion. I'm the Director of Student Services for the School District of Waukesha.
Hi, I'm Jason Trimborn, City of Waukesha Police Department, currently assigned as School Resource Officer at Waukesha West High School.
Hi everyone, my name is Michaela Becker. I'm the Youth Prevention Program Lead at Elevate.
Hello, I'm Carla Rodriguez. I'm a social worker at Waukesha County Health and Human Services in the Adolescent and Family Division, and we have a lot of contact with the Waukesha County schools.
Hello, I'm Jody Ebinger Bentley. I'm the AODA coordinator and a school social worker in the school district.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jeffrey Tagey. I'm the assistant principal at Butler Middle School.
Great. Just a few reminders that part one of this presentation was recorded and it is available on Elevate's YouTube channel and will shortly be available on the School District of Waukesha's YouTube channel as well. Please use the chat box tonight to ask questions or report issues with any audio video. If you can't hear us, if you're having technical difficulties and you don't believe it is on your end, please just put that in the chat box so that we can address it promptly. If time allows, we may be able to take a couple of questions at the end. And then also, we are planning a Spanish presentation covering the same information, which should be available in September of 2020. All right, so to start off, we just want to share a little bit about the prevention efforts in the School District of Waukesha. These efforts have really grown over the last few years due primarily to our great partnership with Elevate, a local nonprofit organization committed to preventing and intervening with youth substance use. The first program I want to highlight tonight is Too Good for Drugs. It's an evidence-based curriculum that reinforces social-emotional learning and educates students about drugs and alcohol at an age-appropriate level. Right now, we are implementing Too Good for Drugs at Butler and Les Paul Middle School in all 3 grade levels. We also have a planned expansion to other schools in the future. Really helps to reinforce those social-emotional skills that students are already learning through second step curriculum, and it promotes those pro-social behaviors and resisting peer pressure and influence. It aims to educate students on certain substances and the health risks and other consequences associated with substance use. Too Good for Drugs has had some promising and encouraging results since we started implementation 3 years ago. Currently, the percent of students who reported that they will not use substances in the next year are all above 90%. As you can see from this slide, students are learning about the dangers and the health risks of the use of tobacco, alcohol, marijuana, and prescription drugs, and are committing to not using these substances within the next year. Next, I would like to highlight our Peers for Peers program, which is a school-based after-school club that really focuses on promoting healthy lifestyles and providing support to their classmates, their peers. So our peer helpers, they commit to being drug and alcohol free and tobacco free. They engage in training 3 times per year just to become empathetic listeners and leaders in their school and community. They also work to really educate their fellow students about substance use and mental health, and really just direct them to resources in their building, to trusted adults in their school that can help them, their peers, with problems. So problems can range from, anxiety over a test, or, being upset about a test that didn't go well or got a failing grade, to sometimes suicidal ideations and things like that. And so our peer helpers are really go through a lot of intensive training just to know what to do in those situations. And they also have done some fun things during their school lunch hours just to bring awareness and attention to mental health and other AODA issues. We've got some good outcomes as well for our Peers for Peers clubs, and really looking at an increase of perception of risk of harming themselves if they would use substances. So before participation, you can see on this bar graph that is in the green of kind of how they perceived harming themselves if they use these substances at these rates. And then the purple is after participation in Peers for Peers training. And so as we can see, although there is just a slight increase in perception of risk for using e-cigarettes or vaping and using marijuana, there is quite a large increase in perception of risk for binge drinking alcohol, smoking a pack of cigarettes, and using prescription drugs. So we really like to see these results and know that not only are our peer helpers hopefully having a positive impact on their peers in their schools, but also this is also impacting them and their perceptions and their outcomes as well. So now I would like to just transition to what happens if my student is suspected of violating the AODA policy. So what really happens in schools when a report comes in? And this section, Jeffrey Tagey, the assistant principal from Butler, he is going to just walk us through that process.
So the nice thing about the school district of Waukesha is we have a lot of policies that guide our investigative process. I won't be getting into the policies, but I'll talk about that process when a report comes in. So the first thing that happens as soon as we get a report is we begin our investigation. On the screen here, you'll see what an example student incident report looks like. One of the things that's crucial to our investigative process is we collect written statements from all students who are reporting things to us or who are involved in an investigation. It allows us really to collaborate as a team while we're taking a team approach to our investigation. Typically, in our school, an administrator as well as an individual from our student services team participate in the investigation process so that we are making sure that we're supporting students from both ends. The due process piece is also really important. When we get an investigation initiated by a student, we take that statement, we look for other individuals that we might need to talk to, we look at surveillance footage to see if there's an alignment between what's being reported. I can tell you that in every instance of a report centered around AODA issues, it has always turned out that it has been on campus. Typically, we don't have students who are making false reports about students being in possession or under the influence of something that they shouldn't while on school grounds. So we use this time to make sure that we have all of the information while also making sure that everybody involved is safe. Obviously, being in possession and being under the influence have different safety implications as part of that process. If we have a suspect under the influence, then we make sure that we pull that individual in promptly so that we can make sure that they are safe and provide any sort of medical attention or intervention that we might need to during that time. Sometimes that'll have an SRO involvement, whether or not we need to administer a breathalyzer or those kinds of things, depending on what the report is coming in. If there's not a report of being under the influence, we really like to make sure that we're taking our time and gathering all of the information before we bring the individual who have the accusation made against them, so that we understand the context of the situation, and that guides our questioning with how to approach them. The other two pieces, the supporting and the educate, kind of go hand in hand, which is also one of the reasons why we have a member of our student services team in there. Because when somebody is being accused of being under the influence or being in possession of something, that has an emotional impact for them, just as if they were actually under the influence. So while we're going through the investigation, our focus the entire time is on the student safety, not on the disciplinary end of things. Consequences are a part of the work that we do, but they're not the focus. And we guide students through that understanding as we're going through of saying, our job here is just to make sure that you are safe and everyone here is safe, not to get you in trouble or to enforce consequences on you. And so part of that process is just reaffirming the knowledge that they've gained through our universal curriculum. We've had many times where students have come to us to report to say, I remember when we talked about In Too Good for Drugs, this came up, and so this concerned us, which is why we're reporting. Or we'll refer students back to facts or pieces of information that they've learned through that curriculum, and we're reminding them of why that wouldn't be safe if they had something or if they were under the influence of something. One of the other pieces is if we have reasonable suspicion that there actually is the likelihood of them being in possession, we do search lockers, we do search individuals. We follow our process for that. We always make sure that we have at least 2 individuals. Sometimes that's the SRO. A lot of times, again, it's that student services member who's accompanying me or any of other member of our administrative team. But really the whole process is designed around consistency, gathering as much factual and truthful information as possible, and supporting the student the whole time through it, of understanding why it is that we're wanting to get involved and intervene, because we're concerned about their safety, and making sure that we're following up with them. And then, of course, the consequences come in on the back end and are kind of the afterthought of the whole situation.
All right, this is Luke Pinion, Director of Student Services. We want to transition now to talk a little bit more about our policies that we have and how we process through those as administrators, and some guidelines and what that means for our students and parents. Our overarching alcohol and drug policy is 5520. That really just talks about drugs being prohibited. It defines drugs and speaks to the fact that we have to have some education programming, as well as consequences spelled out in other policies that I'm going to go into a little bit more detail of. That specific alcohol and drug policy does not include any kind of caffeine or nicotine, as those are represented in other policies. Board Policy 5600.01 does stipulate different levels of behaviors that might occur in our schools: level 1, level 2, and level 3. Anything that would involve a student being under the influence of a substance, they took it before school, took it outside of school, and are now under the influence at school, is classified as a level 1 offense, which our principals and administration have some discretion on how they process through those based on the context of the circumstances. We do offer our Prime for Life programming in lieu of additional suspension days for that. And the policy does stipulate 1 to 3 days suspension could be issued. But of course, we aren't focused on the disciplinary side of things. We want to really work at remediating and getting to the root. And that's where Prime for Life comes in to support the student. Anything that would involve use, possession, sale, or distribution of any kind of substances would be considered a level 3 offense, in which case we move directly to a pre-expulsion review. Pre-expulsion reviews do also include a 5-day suspension tied to them, and we will often mandate Prime for Life as well through that process. Next slide, please. The pre-expulsion process, what students and parents can expect is always a team meeting. I do facilitate those along with the administration from the school, typically a school counselor, the student and parent, and we really process the incident. Again, although it's disciplinary in nature, we really want to understand what happened, why it's happening, and what we can do to support the student to ensure it doesn't happen again, while also making sure that we're keeping the rest of the student body in school safe, and that environment remaining safe and free from drugs moving forward. There are typically 3 outcomes of pre-expulsions, depending on the context. Again, sometimes they're able to return to the school on a pre-expulsion agreement with different conditions and supports. Other times we may recommend expulsion, but hold that recommendation in abeyance and place the student on an abeyance agreement, which includes removing them from the current school and placing them in an alternative setting for a period of time with conditions and supports, and they work their way back to their home high school or middle school on a very clear plan of support, again, with conditions. And then other times we have to move forward with a Board of Education expulsion hearing, which has its own set of legally governing policies. And then, of course, there are different conditions we would write in student agreements, anything from drug testing to supportive programming like Prime for Life or student services support, requiring releases of information so we can communicate and collaborate with outside providers, other kinds of restorative work or community service, random searches at school, and different types of meetings with other support personnel like our alternative service liaison. And then lastly, I always reference our search and seizure policy 5771, just so parents can really understand when can't my student be searched? What does that process look like? Our administrators, our principals are very good about doing that in a way that really honors student confidentiality and privacy. And they do need reasonable suspicion of drug or alcohol use that would trigger that student search of their personal belongings, backpack, car, pockets, things like that. School property can be searched at any time without reasonable suspicion. And then at times we will bring the drugs from the Waukesha County Sheriff's Office in to do sort of a sniff, they call it, throughout our schools. That's done periodically per administration request. And then, of course, there's legal consequences that Officer Trimborn will go into. And that is really two parallel lines, right? We have our school consequences, support in actions in the school avenue, and then we also have legal consequences that are also going on for the student and family outside of the school setting as well. And then I would be remiss if I didn't say again and stress that context matters. So it's not completely black and white. It is not a zero tolerance policy. It really hinges on a lot of these factors, such as the developmental level and the age of the student, whether or not they might have an individualized education plan. There's certain legal considerations we have to go through if that's the case. How much substances, different types of substances, were they selling it or sharing it? How honest and cooperative were they during the investigation? Do they have a history of such offenses or other circumstances that might surround the incident? And then we'll pass it over to Officer Trimborn.
Thanks, Luke. Hey guys, I just want to start with a concept of why school resource officers are in the building. The number one responsibility for any officer in the school is to keep the building safe. Safety of all those inside the building is really based on trust. Students need to be able to trust that officers and administrators will provide a safe environment to learn, and then the officers and administrators also need to trust that the students know and follow those rules. But we all know mistakes can happen, and in that case, teachable moments are created. Inside the school, similar to in the community, officers train to quickly assess situations and bring them under control. So SROs, primarily, we begin by coordinating any additional resources that may be needed in the school, such as emergency medical services or additional officers to respond. Once the situation is stabilized, though, the SROs and school administration work together to determine, first of all, if a crime has been committed. Was it a criminal act? Was it an ordinance violation or a violation of school policy? Some situations can involve all three levels. When a complete investigation is conducted. Witnesses and individuals involved may be interviewed. Those interviews may take place prior to even parents being notified. Parents will be notified when it's reasonable to do so, but there are reasons for this, and foremost, to protect the integrity of the investigation. Interviews of all juveniles in criminal investigations are recorded per our police department policy, but these are more rare cases, and a majority of the issues inside schools are a result of an ordinance or a school policy violation, not a criminal act. So when it comes to things like these interviews and what Luke noted earlier, when it comes to searches, law enforcement were trained, and we spent a lot of hours in training on how to conduct searches of people in particular. So instead of having school staff who are trained in many other things handle a search of a student, at the high school levels especially, and at the middle schools where there are SROs present, the SROs will then assist school staff in conducting those searches when school staff has their reasonable suspicion for us to help search. Likely, the outcome of a drug investigation pertaining to possession of marijuana or a THC-based vape device, for example, will result in a municipal citation for possession of a controlled substance. The student would be issued a ticket, and a notice to the parent would also be issued at the same time. The parent notice is just to keep the parents informed. It's not a citation for the parents. Most likely, the parent will already be made aware of the situation, but it prevents a lack of communication between parent and student. Almost all juvenile citations will require a mandatory appearance in juvenile court in front of Judge Wimmer and the city attorney. Each citation or ticket will have a dollar amount for the fine, but the judge reserves the right to amend the amount if they determine there's another form of punishment or re-education that may be more beneficial. Community service or educational programs like Aspire or Stop and Think are good examples of this. Everyone in the process is well aware that these mistakes do not define the student, and there are always opportunities to learn new lessons. All right, Jody.
All right, so you heard Luke and Officer Trimborn mention Prime for Life or Stop and Think. And so just wanted to take just a couple minutes just to talk about some of those early intervention services that are mandated sometimes, or they are at least offered as an alternative to a different type of punishment or consequence. So Prime for Life is basically an early intervention that is used across the country. It's evidence-based, and it is really looks to inform students of adolescent age in really looking at their risky choices and the consequence of those choices, whether it be their health, natural consequences, and different things that the substances do to them, to their mind, to their developing brain. So we contract with a community organization to provide that evidence-based early intervention. In the past, we would refer parents and students and ask them to complete an AODA assessment with a partner organization as well. And we just really saw that the parents and students just really didn't take that any further, even when it was needed to kind of just address some of those underlying needs. So we felt that this education piece would really be a better way to just address the students' needs and really just give upfront information right away so that they can hopefully learn from their mistakes and then choose different behavior next time. So students typically must complete an 8-hour class. At times we've had that class split up over multiple days because we understand that anyone in an 8-hour class is not going to always retain all that information. Due to COVID and things like that, we have had to move that class virtually. And so we're looking to improve that again next year so that we can have some in-person options and engage our students a little bit more. The class is provided at no cost to the family if referred by the school district. If a child would get a citation from the police department out in the community and have to be referred to juvenile court for that citation, this class would at minimum cost $185. So we felt it was this important to provide this resource to families, again, not as a punishment, but as a way to educate and hopefully intervene early so that student can start to make better choices. Another program that we we piloted at 2 of our secondary schools this school year is called the Aspire program. It is through the University of Texas MD Cancer Center, and it is provided free of charge, which is always a bonus. But we were able to pilot this at Butler Middle School and North High School for students who were had first time vaping or tobacco violations on school property. So either in possession of cigarettes or vaping devices or cartridges that only contain nicotine. This does not include anything with THC in it. Or if they were found, actually vaping like on school grounds or smoking on school grounds. So this program is very interesting and very unique and different than anything we've ever tried to implement because it is virtual. It's a video. There's animation. There's interactive activities that the students go through. There is 8 different modules with different focuses. and they take a pre-test and a post-knowledge test, and there's quizzes along the way through every module. And so we actually get a report of that student's answers, correct answers, and we can really compare their pre-knowledge to their post-knowledge after completing this program. So it takes a total of 3 hours, but it can be done in different sittings. They don't have to all do it at once. And it also is provided in Spanish, which is good for our school district as well, since we have many bilingual students. And so far we've had about just about 20 students go through this program this semester, and we are looking to expand it into all of our secondary schools for the upcoming school year as an alternative to a suspension or a citation by the police department as deemed appropriate by our administration and our SROs in the school. So that kind of wraps up kind of the those early intervention that we have. We also have other supportive services through student services staff throughout our schools as well, and always can provide referrals and resources to parents and families who are really struggling with a child that might be using or getting into drug use. In addition to that, we have a great relationship with Waukesha County Department of Health and Human Services. And as I mentioned earlier, we have Carla Rodriguez here, who is going to talk about the different supports that are available through the county. And there's really some great services to check out if you are struggling or just needing to know some more of what you can do to affect that child that you're concerned about.
Hello. So as a social worker, we receive referrals through different avenues to work with the kids in the community. One of the ways that we receive referrals is through the schools. If there are any concerns with truancies, we also receive law enforcement referrals, and we also have parents come in voluntarily and ask for assistance. So when we have these referrals, there are different things that happen. But I have these phone numbers up here because I wanted to let the parents know that if there are concerns and the school and the parents have tried everything they can and they've already tried some things in the community and they're still frustrated and need extra support, that you can voluntarily, you just call and you will get somebody in access in English or in Spanish, and you can describe what your concerns are. And what happens then is that you go through an intake. First, there's a phone call to assess what your needs are, and then you go through an intake. And this intake worker can refer you to either the different programs or in our agency at Waukesha County, or programs in the community that you might have not thought about yet, that you might not know about. So it will depend on the individual and what their needs are. When we also have at our county, we have an outpatient mental health and AODA clinic, and there are programs for youth, specifically for youth, individual and group programs. There's also some mental health supports and some programs also for children with disabilities that are community coordinated services. So depending, again, on the situation of the student, whether they have an IEP, whether they have any special needs, you can call and you can get some supportive services that some of them, most of them are covered by insurance. If they're counseling, if they're community supportive programs, they're covered by insurance. If you call and you're asking for voluntary services and you have an intake and you start receiving voluntary services, you would be able to work with an ongoing social worker. This doesn't involve any court, and this doesn't involve any fees at the moment. It's something that I wanted to let you know that in the future they might be assessing some fees. There's always a way to talk about if there's a concern that you want supports but you can't afford the services, you can always ask for a reduction in fees. We never want the fees to be in the way of you receiving services. So if you do this without any kind of court involvement, an ongoing social worker can refer you to, we have like a homebound, it's basically homebound support services where we have what we call an intensive supervisor that works for Wisconsin Community Services, and they help support the social worker in working with your child. Or we could have mentors, or we could refer them to some community services to help with proactive activities. Or if there's some extra concerns and your child is not behaving and you're really worried that they're going to get into more trouble in school, they might get expelled, and you don't want them to have any more trouble with law enforcement, or they're not willing to go into treatment and you really need them to kind of get what's going on, we can go the court route. The court route is asking you to file a petition that's called a JIPS petition, which is a juvenile in need of protection or services. And that is when you're asking the court to help you with your child. Now that's a lot more serious, a lot more involved, and might involve your child even being taken into custody if there's any kind of danger. So those are all things that can be discussed depending on what your concerns are and how serious the safety concerns are. What is going on with your child? Is it just a question of monitoring education, even drug screens, or is it something more serious? So the best thing to do is always to start by calling our access number and discussing what it is that you need. And if you need an ongoing worker to support you with the school, we have an excellent relationship with the schools in Waukesha County. That's it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Carla. So the last part of our presentation today is that we just wanted to go over some frequently asked questions. We had a couple questions from our session last week that we wanted to address because we didn't have time to address it at the end of part one. And also just give a little bit information before we close out here for the night. So the first question is, what do you do as a parent if you suspect your child may be using drugs? And I'm going to hand it over to Michaela to answer that one.
Hi, everyone. My name is Michaela Becker. As I mentioned in the beginning, I'm the Youth Prevention Program Lead at Elevate, and we're a local nonprofit that's focused on substance use prevention, intervention, and recovery. So the first thing I would recommend when you are suspecting that your child might be using drugs or substances is to take a deep breath. So while having these suspicions might be scary, it's important to approach them in a level-headed manner and do some preparation before you actually approach your teen. The next thing I would suggest is to bring your concerns to anyone who shares parenting responsibilities with you so that you can be on the same page. And it's important to remember that no one is at fault, no one's to blame, but it is important that everyone sharing parental responsibilities presents themselves to the teen as a united front. Prepare yourselves to have a conversation with your child and not a confrontation. So wait until your child is no longer under the influence of substances. Try to eliminate distractions and try to stay calm. It's important that you try to not overreact to what has already happened, but instead focus on what you want for your child in the future. It'll help the conversation along if you start by expressing things like how much you care about your child's health and well-being. Try to ask your child open-ended questions, trying to avoid questions that only get a yes or no response. Keep the conversation open and honest. We all make mistakes, but emphasize that you're concerned about your child's safety. If you find the conversation is getting heated, I would recommend putting it on pause until everyone has a chance to cool off, because if everyone's getting heated, you're not doing anything that's super productive. So it's good to just take a beat and have everyone cool down. Be prepared before you have the conversation with any evidence that you have to support your suspicions. Clearly state to your child the evidence that you found, like your grades have dropped, or I found empty beer cans in your trash. Also, before you have the conversation with your child, have a clear idea of what rules and consequences that you have established or would like to establish. Make sure that anyone you share parenting responsibilities with, again, is on the same page. And don't set consequences that you're, not ready to enforce or unlikely to enforce. And then making sure during your conversation to listen to your child's feedback. Take the opportunity to turn it back on them and ask them how can they repair the damage with their actions and choices. How can they make lower risk choices in the future? Teens are way more likely to follow through with plans that they've helped develop themselves. Um, so that's always a great option. And if you do find that your child is using substances, reach out to resources in your community for support. Your child's school counselor, social worker, psychologists, all those student services team members at the school can all help assess whether or not your child is struggling with an addiction. And they can make referrals to early intervention programs, assessments, and treatment if needed. Your child's doctor is also a great resource. So take a deep breath, plan out your next steps, have an open conversation, and then ask for support. Don't go through this, feel like you have to go through this alone.
Thanks so much, Michaela. The next question we received from a parent is, what do you do if you find substances in your child's room or possession? Officer Trimborn, I'm going to ask you to take that one.
All right. First of all, I want to reiterate the fact that parents, please, please, please have conversations with your kids about their expectations of privacy under your roof. Be engaged in their lives. And when you're engaged, that means you're going to be a little intrusive. Let them know that their rooms are going to be subject to search. Educate yourself on the current trends. Similar to the last class when we discussed what those current trends are and what to look for, it'll be easier to identify those items. If those items are located, confiscate them, and then, like Michaela said before, begin that conversation. Open up that communication with your child. If you feel confident to handle the situation inside your home, you have that right. Then just destroy the items you found and work on repairing that trust inside your family. Beyond that, law enforcement can provide you an assist anywhere along the way. And it's our goal to keep control in the hands of the parents. So, we'll really play off of your wishes as the process goes along, especially if it's trying to bring back a little bit of order into your households. Law enforcement can also help you identify and dispose of those items recovered as well. So when in doubt, please reach out to your school SROs if you have any questions and utilize them as a great resource to walk you through this process.
Great. Thank you so much, Officer Trimborn. Here is also another question from a parent who attended our part 1 last week. And she asked, how long has the district been using Speak Up, Speak Out? And have you seen a growing trend of students utilizing this to share what they're seeing amongst their peers, hoping it may alleviate some of the peer pressure? So I'm going to ask Luke to talk a little bit about what Speak Up, Speak Out is, as parents may have received an email but really didn't look at it. And then Officer Trimborn is just going to kind of just talk a little bit about what he has been seeing in the schools with reports through Speak Up, Speak Out.
Thanks, Jody. So Speak Up, Speak Out really is an anonymous reporting system. It was new to Wisconsin this school year. It came from the Wisconsin Department of Justice. School districts that received state funds and federal funds for safety grants were required to implement it. And they kind of brought it forward to us at the beginning of the school year. We launched it in our elementaries at the end of first semester. And our secondary schools launched it throughout this second semester. And truly, it's an anonymous way for students, parents, community members to report any kind of safety issue, whether that's a threat, any kind of safety around suicide concerns, to the system. And when the system receives a tip, it is reported then to the Department of Justice, to the Waukesha Police Department, as well as to the school building administration to respond to it in a timely manner. And to ask the question of, are we seeing trends? We really, since we've launched it, have seen kind of a surge in the days after launching it, and then it has subsided. But we certainly have seen students and community members using the tip line. If Officer Trimmer wants to speak a little bit more about how the logistics of it work in the school side of things when you get a tip.
Yeah, the tip line is staffed 24/7 by a dispatcher, if you will, through the Department of Justice. So that dispatcher is asking a lot of the good follow-up questions that help us move along toward coming to a resolution in any of these investigations, whether it's a threat to the school, whether it's a student in crisis, or reports of bullying or things like that that might be going on undetected to this point, happening in the halls. So it's created a little bit of a opportunity to open communication without any pressure or fear. And you know how everybody's so attached to their phones and their devices. The communication is very simple, and it's very easy for us to allow that message to be shared. So what we're seeing, at least in the high school level that I've been exposed to, is a free flowing of information that sometimes we are aware of, and also sometimes that it is new information to us that we're able to follow up with and help either those in crisis much faster, or get to the bottom of any threats or bullying situations. So the program has showed that it is beneficial, and it has the ability to really help us in sharing information, because like I said before, a lot of safety in our building is based on trust, and showing that we have this program now that we can trust to share information from the students who are the eyes and ears in the hall, and then filter that up the food chain through either school administration or to law enforcement. It makes us that much more prepared, and in fact, that much safer.
So just to wrap things up, if you are watching this presentation, if you could complete our super brief survey, it just helps us improve presentations in the future and come up with new ideas that are important to people who attend our presentations. We also will post a link for both presentations and send it out to all who registered. And then they will also be posted on the SCW YouTube channel and on Elevate's YouTube channel. And please feel free to share these links with other parents or friends or anyone that you know that could benefit from this information.
All right, I just want to thank everyone. And if you're watching this as a recorded presentation, I thank you for your interest. And please just feel free to reach out if you have any questions and you're not here live right now. Please just feel free to reach out. You can find my contact information there. And as the AODA coordinator, I will try to answer any questions that you might have, or at least refer you to the right person who can get those answers for you. We really do appreciate everyone's participation and our speakers tonight who took time and their expertise to share with us. So thank you so much and have a great night.